are back here on Good Morning Tobago. Thank you for staying with us. We just had a very insightful discussion with Dr. Faith B. Israel, our Health Secretary, and we continue on. We're shifting a little bit into something about our lifestyle, our bodies. So we'll just like to welcome Mr. Gregory Arneaud, CEO of Health Solutions. He is a respiratory therapist and author of the book, The Wake Up Call, How You Sleep is How You Live. Let's welcome Mr. Arneaud this morning. Mr. Arneaud, could you kindly just turn on your mic for us?
Good morning, Natalya. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm hearing you very clearly now. How are you this morning,
Sorry,
Mr.
I just
Arneaud?
wanted. I'm great, but my surname is Arneaud, Gregory Arneaud. It make it a little easier.
No. Thank you so much for the correction. So can you give us some insight into the roles and responsibilities of a respiratory therapist?
Wow, respiratory therapy has a lot of different responsibilities. I think that during the COVID time is where most recognition came about what a respiratory therapist actually does. With primarily anything that involves your breathing, any sustaining of using mechanical ventilation to be able to sustain breathing. Patients who may have COPD, which is called chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, emphysema, asthma, a number of types of COVID and pneumonia, things such as these are most of the responsibilities of a respiratory therapist. But very much, I would say, respiratory has moved more into looking at sleep apnea when looking at the amount of people who are having deficiencies in breathing in their sleep. And this is something that I believe respiratory has kind of hung their hat on now, being that this is something that they address on a day-to-day basis, and understanding that this is something that needs to be addressed because of the amount of people around the world suffering from this condition.
All right. So, Mr. Arneaud, he has just briefed us on our topic for this morning. We'll be discussing sleep apnea. I know a lot of us may not know, or a lot of our viewers may not know what sleep apnea is. So I'm asking Mr. Arneaud to just brief us on what sleep apnea is, what signs and symptoms we look for to know that we do have this condition.
Well, first off, I'll tell you, sleep apnea affects more than 1 billion plus people worldwide. So if you have sleep apnea, you're not alone. A sleeping disorder that causes pausing in your breathing and shallow breath. Typically, this could happen for a few seconds or even last up to minutes. And over multiple times, if this is going on during your sleep process, it's going to affect your sleep quality and eventually start causing issues in your health with managing your blood pressure and your weight and keeping alert throughout the day, and eventually could even lead to premature death due to heart attack, strokes, and motor vehicle accidents.
Okay, so who does this condition affect? Does it affect the younger ones, older ones, or does it have a specific group that it will normally affect? Or is it just a condition that would affect a general population of people?
Well, for the most part, we all have to sleep. And we realize that without getting a good night's sleep, it's going to affect us one way or the other. It doesn't have a particular race or gender ethnicity that we could probably think that are somewhat tied to certain types of health concerns. If you are in the back of your throat having a collapse of your tonsils or airways, or your tongue kind of falling into that space where air is supposed to travel back and forth, you're going to have most often a drop in your oxygen level, at the same time an increase in your heart rhythm and blood pressure. And this is kind of the roller coaster that most people are on night in and night out, not realizing that vibrational sound on the back of the palate, that snoring sound, is an indication and a symptom to this concern.
What inspired you to deal specifically with sleep apnea?
Oh man, that's a crazy question. I would have never thought for the life of me I'd be in sleep. As you in my book, I wrote about that. If anything you could have ever thought that people who knew me would be in, this wouldn't be it. But at the same time, it became so fascinating to me as I learned more and more, and I doing research about how every aspect of our lives has something that's connected to how well we sleep over the term of our lives. And as I continue to dive into it more and more, I would just say my passion grew more and more at the same time. And kind of focusing on one particular area, which was sleep apnea, was the kind of my step into the space. And then getting to the point where I decided, that people needed to know this. These were the type of things that people were being explained to by their physician, even by in schools, and even the parents who abuse sleep, just trying to do what they have to do to take care of their children and their responsibilities. They never really understand how important sleep is. So I'm even thinking now of kind of making a children's book, just so that children can talk and learn about sleep. If you want to read something to your child, let them know that their dreams are all predicated on how well they are able to sleep and be energized to achieve them.
All right. So you mentioned a book, and that we'll get further into your book as we go along. But right now, I would like you to explain to us what exactly sleep apnea does to the rest of your life on a whole. You mentioned that it affects your day-to-day living a whole lot. So what is the effect on other lifestyle conditions or diseases that we may be facing? How does it contribute to us experiencing those?
Well, the first thing is if you got sleep apnea, most often you got to have a pretty bad attitude or your mood is going to be affected. Because if you're not getting sleep, you just feel crummy, right?
Yes.
Sleep apnea is going to cause not just problems for yourself, but also could be causing problems for your partner, your spouse, your bedside partner. I speak to hundreds and hundreds of people every week, providing consultations about their sleep. And I'm realizing that the impact that it's having on relationships is actually far greater than I even could imagine. Because if you're not able to get a good night's sleep with your partner and forced to now have to sleep in a different place of the home, it's going to take away from the intimacy and the connection and the bond that you have, obviously, when you have that ability to share that bed space. At the same time, it gets to a point now where you become so tired. You don't really have much energy to do some of the things that your partner wants to do. And if you even show up, you're not even active. You're kind of dozing off or losing the precious moments of life that you could enjoy. But, when you start thinking about how it affects your blood pressure, how it affects your sugar levels, how it affects your ability to manage your day just on a whole. But the brain that needs oxygen, just like every other organ in the body, when it's not getting sufficient oxygen for these prolonged hours every day and every evening as we sleep, eventually it's going to lead to something that, obviously affected my own family. My grandmother, developed dementia. So, this is something that's pretty serious when you don't really take heed to it, because it's not like a toothache. You don't feel pain when you have a bad night's sleep, typically, outside of just feeling tired. And the first thing that most people are doing is running for their first cup of coffee to get their day started. So, this is something that's going to affect every aspect, from your weight to your reasoning, to your ability to perform. Even those athletes that think they're in great shape because you're lifting weights and not realizing that you too need oxygen, and the body needs that particular time of rest to improve the muscle tone, to be able to repair and rejuvenate it, so that you can get the gains and the growth that you're looking for, and obviously perform at your best.
So we've heard that a lack of sleep can actually affect your hormone levels. So what does that mean for men and women? I know, of course, some men would have higher levels of hormones in certain areas than women, like testosterone. The woman will be higher in estrogen and these type of things. So how does a lack of sleep affect these type of things?
Well, a lack of sleep eventually is going to throw your whole life into a whirlwind. When you think about hormones, we always think women, right? But yes, men are also impacted by hormone imbalance. We'll start with women and men in general. We all have to eat, right? Just as much as we have to sleep. And our body regulates what we call our desire to eat and to know when we're full by two hormones that are released, called leptin and ghrelin. So if you're eating more than you should, obviously you're going to put on weight. And if you're eating more often than you should, typically the same thing. And the body is going to go into this kind of a storing mode, and your metabolism slows down when you're not getting sufficient sleep. And this now is a problem that leads to weight gain. Most people don't know that connection. But I would say, from a male perspective, more than anything, most men are suffering from erectile dysfunction and sexual dysfunction because of the inability of the blood flow to go to the penile area during a stage of sleep, which we call REM sleep, rapid eye movement, where this is the highest level of testosterone development for men. And often we have a penile erection during this particular time of our sleep. And it's not due to an erotic thought or dream. This is actually a function that has to happen. And unfortunately, most men are looking for alternative options of how to address these concerns and not realizing that their sleep is impacting their performance, not just on the job, but also in the bedroom. And at the same time, when you are treating sleep apnea, when I tell you the partners that I get to hear from and how this changed their bedroom experience, not just from the snoring stopping when we treat sleep apnea, but obviously how it's, created the fireworks once again back in their relationship.
All right. And you mentioned that you do consultations. I'm hearing that, a lot of couples have benefited from your advice on getting more sleep. I am also benefiting as well because you mentioned that if we want to lose weight, we need to sleep. And that just stood out for me. Let me just put that in right there. So I'll be sleeping a lot more, to help myself. Right?
Well,
So
let me tell you something,
what are
Natalya.
some
If I could tell you this,
go ahead.
if I could tell you this before you leave that point there, sleeping longer does not change the aspect of what could happen in regards to some of these concerns. It's the quality of your sleep that is what's most concerning, that people don't understand. You could have a great night's sleep in 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep if it's not fragmented by pauses in breathing, or you can sleep for 8 hours with hundreds of events and never feel the same benefits that you would for half the time. So I just wanted to point that the quality of your sleep is more important than the quantity, but they do go hand in hand.
I don't want to get sidetracked, but there are some times when you would want to go and sleep and your mind is still racing, right? So I'm going to tie that into my next question, and that is, how do you combat sleep apnea? How do you deal with this condition? I mean, of course, besides sleeping itself, how do we prepare ourselves to have a better rest to combat the condition on a whole?
Well, first off, sleep apnea is one of the many 80 types of different sleeping disorders, and this affects breathing. When you're having challenges to fall asleep or to even stay asleep, obviously because the mind is racing or whatever issues that may be going on, this is called insomnia. It's a different type of sleep disorder. You can have a combination of both. Most persons who have sleep apnea have about 30% chance of having insomnia as well. Waking up in the middle of the night, having not ability to go back to sleep, having to go to the restroom frequently, at the same time maybe waking up with dry mouth or maybe headaches even. But overall, when you take a look at sleep, you have to understand that every function of our lives is predicated on how well we sleep. I started this process of talking about how well you sleep is how well you live, or how you sleep is how you live. And then I realized that how you sleep is how you love, how you work, how you look, how you feel. And like I said, this every aspect of our life will be determined on how well we do this, which is a third of our lives. And to come to think about it, and nobody really thinks about, well, what actually happens when I close my eyes? Is it just to hope that you can dream? But more importantly, that dreaming is great, but waking up is better. And half the people that are suffering from sleep apnea, I would say around the world, that are having heart attacks and strokes don't even realize that this is underlying cause of this.
Right. So you mentioned a few things where what that we can do to combat this sleep apnea condition. I know you mentioned a few of these things in your book, and I want you to give us a little synopsis as we close on your book, The Wake Up Call, How You Sleep is How You Live. So could you give us a synopsis on the book, and where can we find the book, and where can we find more information on the sleep apnea condition?
Well, I'll tell you, I got inspired to write a book because I never thought I would be an author, to be honest. But because of my personal journey in dealing with sleep apnea and losing a grandmother, my whole family's from Trinidad. My mother's from Belmont. My father's from Port of Spain, Maracas, St. Joseph side. But at the same time, when we realized that my grandmother lived with us off and on when she came up from Trinidad with us in South Florida, that her room was like, the loudest room of the house when the lights went off. There was more snoring coming out of that room than I could have ever imagined. And as a child, I had no idea what that meant. But later on, as I became more aware as a clinical respiratory therapist, I realized that my grandmother suffered from this, which led to all the issues that she was dealing with, like her blood pressure, her weight, dementia, and glaucoma, and other. Obviously, her life was deteriorating for such a long time. So I felt that we needed to do something to kind of leave, I guess, a legacy in the understanding that if people don't get this information, they're going to suffer. There is no, well, if I ignore it, it's not a big deal. But at the end of the day, this is something that can affect you and can affect you a lot sooner than you can actually imagine. So in this book, I kind of use humor, I use facts and research, I use my personal journey and experiences and the knowledge that I've gained over the last 25 years as a respiratory therapist about sleep apnea and giving solutions to mothers about their children's sleep, about their women's sleep, about men in sleep, relatively how sleep is diagnosed, where are the locations where you should be tested, what you should be doing to be able to get a good night's sleep. So I'm hoping that persons who get a chance to pick up this book, they're able to realize it's on Amazon. The Wake Up Call, How You Sleep is How You Live. And we also have it available in Trinidad at our various locations. So I'm excited to once again also let you know we're going to have the audiobook available here in the next few weeks. So those Gen Z babies who don't like to read and so forth, we can give them an opportunity to still get the information by hearing it through an audiobook.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Mr. Gregory Arneaud, for joining us this morning. Thank you for telling us a lot about your book. We look forward to more information. We look forward to buying the book, to listening to the audio, according to you, for the Gen Z individuals that are viewing us here live. We want to thank you so much also for delving into the condition of sleep apnea for our viewers who may not have been aware of the condition. Now they know how to get treated. Of course, you have consultations available and all of this can be found. Yes, where can we find it? At Sharina Mohammed, ISD Health Solutions. You can call the office at 657-6673 or mobile 468-1858. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Arneaud.
It's my pleasure. You have a wonderful and blessed day.
Thank you so much, viewers. We encourage you to share the live, share the live, share the live.